I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw, for I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the Spirit, and the shape of all shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. This was said by Black Elk of the Oglala tribe. I had some wonderful parents that I knew. Before my mother died, I didn't know her very well, because she died when I was so young, but I heard real good things about her, that she was a real good Christian. She loved her kids. There were all 11 of us there, and she loved us all and tried to raise us the right way until she got sick. And I've heard that she could speak Spanish fluently, and she was a basket maker, and also she embroidered, crocheted. She knew a lot of things, and I'm sorry that I never knew her. It makes me sad, but I had my dad. Later on, I lived with him, and he was a good man, a good Christian man. He made us go to church. Of course, when we're kids, they have to make you go to church, because we'd go to church at the reservation in Prescott, and it was far. It was far from our house, but we had to walk over there. And sometimes we'd go behind the reservation and just play all day and then come home. But the people there would tell him that we did not go to church, and we'd have to listen to him tell us that we needed to go to church. And now, in my older age, I can understand why. My mom was, I think, somewhat. I look like her. She was a very beautiful lady. She did so many things, and she was always helping people. A good Christian lady, like my dad was Christian. They were both Christian, so she was always at church doing things for others, and I heard that she could speak Spanish very fluently and spent a lot of time in Berlin, New Mexico, where she had friends, Spanish friends. She'd go back and forth because we had a railroad pass that enabled us to go a lot of places we wouldn't have been able to if we didn't have that railroad pass. And she'd go back and forth, and she was helping people here and there. She knew a lot of things, handicrafts, which she made, and she sold to help my dad with expenses for raising all the kids. There are so many of us. Okay, but mostly girls. 2 sons, and that was 7 girls. So she had a time making dresses, I guess, for all us girls. And I'm so thankful that I had her as my mom. I hear nothing but good things about her. I didn't know her personally, and it's a very sad thing not to know your own mom when she died rather young. And my dad was alone for a long time before he remarried. So I have a few pictures of her. She's always carrying the kids, and she's always making something. And I'm proud of what she was, and I only wish I could have known her better. it, it makes me sweat. And this way. I was raised by my grandmother right after my mother died, and my grandmother was a tall lady. She was big, and most of her offspring are tall. Like my sons are all over 6 feet tall, and she brought us all up in the Christian faith, and she did her best to supply us with food, although she got a check once a month. And on those days, we'd walk to Cottonwood from her house in Clarkdale, and she'd buy groceries, mostly staples, and that would be flour and potatoes and coffee. She loved to drink coffee too, just like I do. And she'd take us to church. We had church on Sunday, Wednesday night, and we went twice on Sunday, so we were always over there, and we learned. Even though I'd be playing on the side of her and leaning on her and looking like I was asleep, I always listened. And she had us learn everything about the Bible, and we were lucky because the preacher was a Yavapai, and he spoke in Yavapai. He preached in Yavapai. His name was Andrew Jackson, and he was a humorous man too, always making jokes, and he was so great to know. He traveled the Yavapai reservations like Fort McDowell, Clarkdale, and Prescott, and everybody knew him. Now my grandmother had very little, but everyone was welcome at her house. We could go there, have something to drink, and something to eat. And she always fed this Andrew Jackson, the preacher, and he told us stories about the different places he went to. And he always remembered us at Christmas. He'd bring us something. He knew that my grandmother was barely getting by. And people, to me, at that time were more generous than they are now. If they went out hunting and shot a deer, they'd always bring us some. Moving to this area to live with my grandmother, I attended public school in Clarkdale. There's an old school on the other side of town, and it's still standing there today. That's an elementary school I went to. Today it's being remodeled for another use, but it is still standing there. I can see the steps where we used to take our school pictures. And there was a few Indians in my class. There was about 3 from the reservation in that class. And it was hard for me because I came from a family where no one spoke English. So I had to struggle along and try to figure out what was going on. But I did manage to learn on my own. Nowadays people need tutors to help them every step of the way, but with me, I picked it up on my own, and I really enjoyed learning English. And the reading books that we had on Dick and Jane, I'd bring them home to my grandma, and she didn't understand English, but I read it to her anyway. And I'd get stuck on words like airplane. How do you say airplane in Yavapai? Well, she told me it's something that flies, and that's a word I use. to describe the airplane. I stayed there with my grandmother and went to school until I was old enough to go live with my dad. And I went to public school there, and it was very nice because my dad was a very dependable man. He went to work every day. He wasn't sick much. He hardly ever got sick. And I think I take after him in that I'm the same way. I never get sick, and with colds, I never catch colds. And I'm grateful for that. I feel I am very blessed with the things that I have that are mine. And my dad was extra special. Although Indians like him grew up in a time where we didn't have any hugging or kissing or telling each other that we cared about them. Um, it is different now because I try to use that with my kids, let them know how much I love them. Whereas I knew with my dad, because of the way he cared for us, and he was dependable, always there. If we needed anything, we could ask him, and he'd be there. He didn't wander off. He wasn't a drinker, and he took care of us really good. Without a mother, I guess it's hard for a man to raise a bunch of girls, but he raised us all, and I finished high school there. A lot of times I was on the honor roll because I was always studying. I didn't fool around much. I was always studying, and I learned a lot. And I'm grateful for that part that I had to learn what I did learn. And because my dad hadn't finished school, he had gone to maybe somewhere in the elementary grades. He was maybe fourth, fifth before he got out. And he went to an Indian school, so he didn't learn much except how to cook. So he always cooked for us girls and all us sisters, and that is my excuse for not knowing how to cook today, is that my dad was a great cook and he wanted to do all the cooking, so I'm not very good there. And he was a blessing to us kids, as he always made us go to church and was there to support us in whatever we needed. And he used the Yavapai language all the time, except when he was at work. So we kept up the language in our family with so many of us, all 11 of us, talking all the time. We didn't forget it, and that's the way I grew up.
There is a road in the hearts of all of us, hidden and seldom traveled, which leads to an unknown secret place. The old people came literally to love the soil, and they sat or reclined on the ground with the feeling of being close to a mothering power. Their teepees were built upon the earth, and their altars were made of earth. The soul was soothing, strengthening, cleansing, and healing. That is why the old Indian still sits upon the earth instead of propping himself up and away from its life-giving forces. For him to sit or lie upon the ground is to be able to think more deeply and to feel more keenly. He can see more clearly into the mysteries of life and come closer in kinship to other lives about him. This was said by Standing Bear of the Oglala tribe.
I grew up in this valley, in this whole area, the, the Verde River, and my thoughts were always to continue learning. It was fun for me to learn, and so after I went and left to live with my dad, I finished high school, and I learned mostly on my own because there was no one in my family to help me. And I went on to college, and I learned all I could. I met some very nice people who wanted to help me, but there were those that didn't want me to learn either. Like the guidance counselor tried to keep me from going. He said, you have nothing in your background to make you want to learn or that you will ever succeed. And I thought to myself, well, I want to, and I will. I will keep on going to school. So I went to the University of Kansas and studied there. We had about 3 other Indians in the whole school, but they were from South Dakota, and I really didn't get to know them. I was busy with my schoolwork, and finally my dad called and said, I need you to come home. You know, nobody over there. It's not our home. You come home. So I came back to Prescott and then continued. I wanted to go back to school. I went to Eastern Arizona because that was close. And he let me go there, so I finished 2 years there. And it has always been my thought that although people try to discourage me and say you can't do it, I felt in myself that I could, and I wanted to. I met my first husband, Leroy Aswanya, senior at the college in Thatcher, and I was real overjoyed because there were several Indians there. There were some Yavapais from Peach Springs, and there were some a few Mojaves and Apaches. So there were several, a lot, well, to me, a lot of Indian boys, which I had never met before. Living in Prescott, there's very few Indians and boys to go around with. I was really impressed by Leroy because he was a full-blood Indian from Parker, and he got there on a football scholarship and agriculture. They have a lot of land in Parker, and he had land, and I was impressed by all that he had. And he had told me that he really grew up with foster parents, and so I felt sorry for him that he didn't have a big family like I did. And I got to know him. We went together in college, and I think we took a psychology course together, which we studied for, and we both passed, and we graduated there. And we had wanted to go on to school, but at that time I became pregnant with my first child, so my plans were kind of cut short. And he got a job with the Bureau of Indian Affairs as a criminal investigator, and we had always hoped so to continue our education and do more and learn more for our children's sake. And I had the one boy, Leroy Aswanya Jr., and I had my next son, who came very soon after the first one, and he was Sammy, named after my dad. And so I had those 2 boys, and we had to struggle to try to provide for them. We had the first 2 sons that we were very happy. I was thrilled because I grew up with nothing but sisters, and to have my own sons, it was really something for me. I would carry them constantly. And it was a while before we had our 3rd son, who was born in Phoenix, and I was happy again to have another boy, and it was just thrilling to me to have 3 sons. And we were so happy with them and proud of them. Everything they did, they were good in sports, and that's where I learned to love sports. All kinds of sports they participated in. And later on, we were moved by the BIA to Browning, Montana, which is way up there in the cold. And for people from the south, like we are from Arizona, it was very hard for us to get used to the cold weather. And but there my only daughter was born in Browning, and I was of course I was by this time ready for a girl, and it was strange because the doctor was angry with me. He said, if you have another son, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to throw it away because you have enough boys? And I said, of course not. I want a girl. The boys want a sister. We're ready for a girl. But we were thrilled with our only daughter, and it's strange that when she came along, I went to work, and with the boys I had stayed home. But now the boys were in school, and with my daughter I put her in daycare, and I went to work.
Hold on to what is good, even if it's a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it's a tree that stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it's a long way from here. Hold on to your life, even if it's easier to let go. Hold on to my hand, even if someday I'll be gone, away from you. This is a Pueblo Indian prayer.
This is where my mother and my grandmother were buried so many years ago. This is the old Clarkdale Cemetery, Indian Cemetery. And it's made up of all these crosses with no names and a few headstones, maybe 2 or 3 headstones.
What is life? It is the flash of a firefly in the night. It is the breath of a buffalo in the wintertime. It is the little shadow which runs across the grass and loses itself in the sunset. This is by Crowfoot of the Blackfoot tribe.